Make coffee and set the table, she said. It was like she was asking the weather to cooperate, like it was the most natural thing in the world to give commands to someone else's mother in someone else's house. She stood there barefoot in my kitchen, wearing my robe, flipping through her phone while the coffee machine hissed behind her. I didn't answer right away. I watched the sun just beginning to press through the curtains, turning the countertops soft gold. This used to be the quietest hour of my day. I liked it that way. The night before they arrived unannounced, Derek said their pipes had burst. Kendall smiled and said, "Just for a few nights until the plumber comes." They had 3 bags each, plus a laptop stand, a blender, and a cat I'd never met. I gave them the guest room and figured I'd clean the linens in the morning. Now Derek was snoring upstairs while Kendall raided my pantry, muttering something about how disorganized everything was. She moved my flour to a higher shelf without asking, saying it looked cleaner that way. I poured the coffee and set the table with my good plates, bone white with tiny wheat motifs around the rim. Kendall didn't notice. She was too busy answering messages. When I asked if she wanted eggs, she blinked at me like I'd interrupted a meeting. "No dairy." Derek's cutting back. I nodded. I didn't say that I still bought those plates on sale after my husband passed just to remind myself I could host people again. I didn't say I knew how Derek liked his eggs when he was 12. I just turned back to the stove and made dry toast and chopped fruit. By the time Derek wandered down in sweatpants, the table was set, my robe on Kendall, my coffee pot in use, my house no longer mine. Kendall looked at him, smiled, and said, "See, told you she's easy to live with." I kept my back turned and reached for the butter knife. There wouldn't be a second morning like this. The original file is no longer accessible, but I have all the context I need. It happened while I was folding towels. Kendall poked her head into the laundry room and said, "We were thinking the master bedroom has better light. Derek's back has been bothering him, and the guest bed is kind of small." I didn't even have time to say no before I heard the closet doors in my room sliding open. By dinner, their suitcases were in my bedroom. My pillows had been replaced with the orthopedic ones she brought, and my nightstand drawer had been emptied. My lotion, my journal, even the photo of me and my husband on our wedding day gone. She didn't throw them away, just tucked them in a box labeled miscellaneous, and stacked it beside the dryer. That night I slept on the daybed in the sunroom. No curtains, just moonlight and the occasional flicker of headlights from the street. I used an old throw as a blanket. My robe had vanished, no doubt still wrapped around Kendall, like a souvenir from some vacation she thought she was owed. In the morning I made biscuits, the same recipe I'd used since Derek was a boy. The smell filled the house. For a moment I felt like myself again. Then Kendall walked in and said, "These are cute. Very quaint." Derek laughed from the kitchen doorway. "You know what? This place needs a grill on the porch. Something big. I could smoke ribs all summer." I said nothing, just wiped my hands and poured them both coffee. Kendall asked if I had almond milk. I didn't. They'd been here 3 days. The fridge was full of things I didn't buy. My pantry had been reorganized for efficiency. My coffee mugs were stacked differently. There was a yoga mat in the living room and a humidifier humming in my old bedroom. Every room smelled like someone else's life. Kendall said they'd start working remotely from here just until the city calms down. Then she added, "Don't worry, we'll contribute." That night, I turned the throw blanket around 3 times trying to find warmth. In the dark, I could hear her laughing from my bed. "Thanks for your patience. The previous file path is no longer accessible, but I still have everything I need to continue." It wasn't a question. Kendall stood at the end of the daybed sipping from my mug. "We're having a few friends over tomorrow," she said. "Just brunch. You make such lovely things. It'll feel so authentic." She called my house the farmhouse, said it would photograph well. When I didn't answer right away, she leaned closer. "Nothing fancy. Eggs, fruit, coffee, maybe some of your biscuits." That night I baked in silence, rolled dough, whipped butter, sliced fruit. I wrote each task on a notepad not because I'd forget, but because I wanted to see the proof that I was being used. Sunday came and the house filled with perfume and high voices. Laughter in rooms I used to protect. A woman in suede heels walked into the kitchen and raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you must be the maid. You live on the property." I didn't correct her. Kendall didn't either. They ate everything, complimented the rustic charm, asked if we rented the place out. One asked if there was a vineyard nearby. Kendall smiled and said, "We're actually thinking of turning this into something long-term. Airbnb maybe, or event rentals. It's got character, right?" Derek chimed in between bites of toast. "We told Mom she should move into town. A condo would be easier at her age. This place is too much upkeep for one person." Everyone nodded like it was a done deal. I stood behind the counter and poured more coffee, refilling cups as if I were paid to be invisible. No one asked me what I thought. Not even Derek, whose childhood bedroom still held his old trophies. They were boxed now. Kendall had cleaned the shelves for better energy. Someone asked if we could do this every Sunday. Kendall glanced at me and said, "If she's up for it." I smiled tight and quiet and said, "Of course." Then I walked out back to the compost bin, where I stood for a long time watching the ants move in neat, obedient lines. Later, while wiping crumbs from the plates, I noticed the printer light was blinking. The blinking light on the printer didn't stop. I thought it might be a shopping list or one of Kendall's meal plans. But when I pulled the page from the tray, my hands went cold. It was a quit claim deed. At the top, my address under Grantaire Maris Talcott, my name under Grantee Derek Talcott, my son. It was already signed by me, or rather by someone pretending to be me. The signature was close but not right. The loop on the M wobbled. The tail on the T hung too long. I stared at it for a long time before noticing the notary stamp, crooked, smudged, and fake. I took the page to my bedroom, or what used to be my bedroom. In the back of the closet, behind a box of winter blankets, I opened my safe. The deed was still there, the original. It named me as the sole owner. No joint tenancy, no transfer clauses. My late husband had made sure of that. He knew how people changed when money sat still too long. I compared the two papers side by side. The forged one had been printed just 3 days earlier. They hadn't asked. They hadn't even tried to talk to me about it. They just filed something quietly and assumed I'd either die or not notice. Maybe both. Kendall's voice echoed from the hallway, laughing about something on her phone. Derek's footfalls thudded toward the kitchen. I closed the safe, put the fake deed in an old recipe book, and locked everything back up. They were making plans with paperwork. I needed to start making mine. Later that evening, I excused myself after dinner and brought tea into the sunroom. I opened my old planner and wrote 2 names. Winslow, attorney, and Hadley, notary I trusted. I circled them both. Then I turned the page and started listing what was still in my name. House, car, accounts. In the kitchen, Kendall was clearing dishes and humming. She had no idea what I'd seen, and that was exactly how I wanted it to stay. The system can no longer access the previously uploaded file, but I already have all the story context. I waited until they went out for a walk. Kendall in yoga gear, Derek trailing behind her with his earbuds in. They didn't invite me. They never did. I called Mr. Winslow from the sunroom. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not since my husband's will was finalized. But his voice was just the same, dry, calm, direct. I told him what I found in the printer. He didn't interrupt, just asked me to read the forged deed out loud line by line. When I got to the signature and the notary seal, he let out a long breath through his nose. "They tried to file it?" he asked. "I don't know, but it was printed. I'll check the registry in the morning. But don't worry, Maris. Your deed has a protective clause." I hadn't remembered that part. He continued, "It's ironclad. Any ownership transfer requires 2 living witnesses, verified ID at the time of signing, and recorded consent. A forged quitclaim deed without those is not just invalid. It's felony-level fraud." I wrote everything down. My hands were shaking, but my pen didn't stop. He asked if I wanted him to call Derek directly. I said, "No." "You're sure?" he asked. "I want them to keep thinking they're ahead." He paused, then said, "Let me know when you're ready to act." I thanked him and hung up. My tea had gone cold. Back in the kitchen, Kendall had left her laptop open. A window was still active. Something about design ideas for a country-inspired event venue. A Pinterest board labeled the Talcott House. She wasn't just nesting. She was branding. I didn't touch the laptop. I didn't move anything. I just took a photo of the screen with my phone and went back to folding laundry like nothing had changed. The truth was everything had changed. From that moment on, I made a rule. Say nothing, touch nothing, but watch everything. The safest plans grow quietly, especially when the people around you have stopped looking at you like you're still real. They came in through the side gate, 4 of them, loud, polished, and ready to be impressed. Kendall greeted them at the back door like she'd been rehearsing it all week. "Welcome to the Talcott house," she said, tossing her hair like the name already meant something. I was in the kitchen finishing the second pot of coffee. One of the women peeked in and asked, "Oh, are you the caretaker? This place is so charming." I smiled and nodded. Something like that. They settled around the dining table while Kendall passed out mimosa glasses and gave them the history of the house. Only she left out the part where it still belonged to me. I served them coffee, handed out napkins, then excused myself to check the muffins. Instead, I slipped out to the garage. The air was cool and smelled faintly of oil. I opened the cabinet beneath the old camping gear and pulled out the locked file box. Inside were the original deed, my husband's will, insurance policies, and every receipt that ever mattered. I placed them carefully on the workbench and called Mr. Winslow. "It's time," I said. He didn't ask for details. He just told me he'd file the fraud complaint within the hour and arrange for the necessary documentation. I told him I also wanted to post a formal 72-hour notice to vacate. He said he'd prepare it. When we hung up, I called the locksmith. All doors, all safes. Tuesday afternoon. I stayed in the garage a little longer listening. The laughter inside rose and fell like waves, soft, confident, careless. Back inside, no one noticed I'd been gone. Kendall was showing her Pinterest board to the guests. Derek was talking about hosting a fall dinner party once things were finalized. I refilled their water glasses and cleared the empty cups. Not a single thank you. I went back to my room, the sunroom now really, and folded the legal draft. Mr. Winslow had just emailed me. I placed it inside an envelope marked with today's date. The locks would change, the house would hold, and they wouldn't see it coming. The file used for earlier chapters is no longer available, but I still have the full outline and context. I woke up before the sun. The house was still for once. No footsteps, no blender, no podcast humming from Kendall's phone. Just the sound of birds and the soft creak of the floor as I moved through the kitchen. I cracked the eggs first, laid out the toast, rinsed the berries, brewed the coffee slow and dark the way Derek used to like it before almond milk and green powder got in the way. I took my time. The table had to be perfect. For plates, for napkins folded crisp, toast stacked neatly, a picture of orange juice not chilled too much, and then the place cards handwritten in ink. Owner Maris, guest Kendall. Non-resident Derek, visitor Claire. Their realtor friend who had the gall to say I look spry for my age. Placed them in front of each setting. 7:42 a.m. they wandered in. Kendall was still in my robe, hair tousled from sleep. Derek wore the same t-shirt from yesterday. Claire trailed behind them, already on her phone. They stopped when they saw the table. Kendall gave a quick nervous laugh. "What's all this?" "Breakfast," I said and motioned for them to sit. No one moved at first. Derek frowned. Claire looked at the place cards, then at me, then back at Kendall. Kendall sat first, pulling her chair out too quickly. "You didn't have to go through all this." "I wanted to." Claire whispered something to Derek. "We eat quietly." No one commented on the labels. No one dared. I passed the jam. I poured the coffee. I kept my hands steady. Halfway through the meal, Kendall finally spoke. "So about the grill idea, I wouldn't invest," I said. She blinked. "Sorry, I wouldn't make plans for something you don't own." Smiled when I said it gently, kindly, but it landed. Claire set down her fork. The silence grew. Derek cleared his throat but didn't speak. I stood up, picked up my plate and carried it back to the sink, already knowing what envelope I'd hand them next. The previous file is no longer available, but I have all the story structure needed. The courier arrived just after lunch. A plain white sedan. A man in a gray polo stepped out holding a document. Envelope with 2 hands like it was breakable. I met him at the porch. He checked the name, nodded and left. Without a word. I didn't have to open. I knew what was inside, but I placed it gently on the kitchen island right in front of Kendall's planner and her half-eaten salad. Then I walked back to the sunroom and poured myself another cup of tea. Took about 5 minutes. Maris. Kendall's voice was too light. Another pause. What is this? She said it louder. Footsteps fast now. She appeared in the sunroom doorway holding the opened envelope in one hand, the notice shaking slightly. A 72-hour notice to vacate. Her voice cracked. Behind her, Derek was unfolding the second document. The fraud complaint. This has to be mistake, he muttered. You're not really doing this. I took a sip of tea. There's an appointment scheduled with a locksmith. Are you serious? Kendall's face had gone pale, her mouth twitching, like she couldn't decide whether to cry or yell. I didn't respond. I folded my napkin instead. Derek stepped forward, tone sharpening. We're family. You forged my signature, I said quietly. You filed it. Kendall opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I checked with Winslow. The deed's still mine. It always was. You can't just. Derek started. I can, I said. And I have. For a few seconds all I heard was the ticking of the wall clock. I stood, walked past them both, and opened the door to the sunroom just wide enough to close it gently behind me. They didn't follow, not right away. They were too busy reading the part that said, failure to comply may result in formal eviction. I sat down with my tea, opened the window just a crack, and let the breeze carry in the sound of panic unraveling quietly down the hall. The file used for the outline is no longer accessible, but I have everything I need to continue. They didn't say goodbye. The morning was overcast. Derek came down first, carrying a duffel bag and avoiding my eyes. He opened the trunk without a word. Kendall followed 10 minutes later, heels clicking too sharply on the floor. She didn't speak either, just carried 2 small boxes, her laptop bag, and a suitcase that still had the house label tag from their last trip. One of them must have folded my robe. It was sitting neatly on the arm of the couch, freshly laundered, like it hadn't been worn every day for weeks by someone who called my biscuits quaint. The only sound was the scraping of cardboard on tile, the soft thump of a trunk closing, and Derek's final trip up the stairs to grab his electric toothbrush. No apology, no thank you, just absence. They didn't slam the door. They didn't linger. The car pulled out of the driveway, slow, quiet. I didn't watch it disappear down the hill. I didn't wave. I waited 10 minutes, then called the locksmith. He arrived just after 5, changed every exterior lock, rekeyed the safe, and installed new codes for the garage doors. I paid in cash and tipped him in bills I'd ironed flat that morning. By 6, the sun was low and the silence had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. Undisturbed, I poured a fresh glass of water. I sat on the porch, looked at the empty driveway. No yoga mat, no cat food bags, no Pinterest boards, just my rose bushes and the faint scent of rain about to come. Inside, I walked slowly to the kitchen and opened the drawer where my place cards still sat. I slipped them out one by one. Owner Maris. I kept that one, burned the others. Then I opened the windows, every one of them. I let the wind pass through the rooms like it was checking what had changed. It stopped at the sunroom, then moved on. The next morning I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the old will. I'd written it 2 months after my husband passed, still aching, still unsure who I could trust. I'd left everything to Derek under the quiet belief that blood meant something. Now I knew better. I sat at the dining table, mine again, and drafted new terms. The property would remain in my name until death and only pass to someone meeting strict residency and conduct clauses. Any attempt to transfer, sell, or alter it without consent would void the bequest. I included a line about caretaking and contribution. Real contribution, not mimosas and fake smiles. By noon I'd signed it. The notary from Hadley's office came by just after lunch. She didn't comment on the changes, just stamped, signed, and passed the pen back to me with a firm nod. That afternoon, I boxed up the ergonomic chair, standing desk, and bamboo laptop riser Kendall had insisted on ordering for her home office. I donated it all to the shelter downtown. A young woman at the front desk beamed when she saw the nearly new furniture. She said they'd use it for intake interviews. I smiled and left quickly before the weight of it caught up to me. Back home I brewed a fresh pot of tea and sat by the window. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the draft I'd started quietly 2 weeks ago, and finished filling out the application. A small fund, modest for now, but focused on legal aid for elderly women dealing with coercion, forged documents, and housing pressure from family. I named it after my grandmother, Agnes Ruth Foundation. She'd once lost her house to a cousin's trick. She never spoke of it. I wished she had. Now someone would. I hit submit. The confirmation email arrived within minutes. I closed the laptop, poured one more cup of tea, and looked out across the lawn where the roses had started to bloom again. No more guests, no more fake kindness, just new terms and the peace that comes with knowing they're mine.